Hi, everybody. Welcome to our panel, Indie Film Tips and Tools for Filmmakers with and Without Disabilities. I am Carl Hansen. I'll be moderating the discussion today. I am a independent filmmaker, Emmy-winning television producer, and disability advocate. And so I want to welcome everybody here today. And a little bit about me. I've competed in the Easterseals Disability Film Challenge, where my team has won Best Film. I've won Best Director. We've been nominated for Best Editing. And in fact, that's why we are here at the Portland Film Festival, because of the Easterseals Disability Film Challenge and our editor, Matthew Placentia, who was nominated for Archaic, Intergalactic, Extraterrestrials, which is the film we have at the festival. The reason I am here is because of a man on the screen, Nick Novicki, who I will then pass it to introduce himself, who founded the Easterseals Disability Film Challenge. Nick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I am Nick Novicki. I am a little person wearing a blue shirt. I have the Easterseals Disability Film Challenge clapper behind me. Sometimes I don't know which way to turn on camera. For those who don't know who I am, I'm an actor, comedian, and producer. I've been lucky that I've been in over 50 TV shows and movies, but the majority of my work has been self-driven. Me producing, creating my own content, which has allowed me to work with people like Martin Scorsese, the Farley brothers. 9 years ago, I looked around, I was like, why aren't more people with disabilities creating their own content? So I created the Disability Film Challenge, which is a film competition where you need to have one person with a disability in front of or behind the camera, making a film following our genre that we give out and that we assign each year. It has grown year after year. I partnered with Easterseals, Southern California. Easterseals is the nation's largest disabilities services organization. So in 2017, we partnered together. And now to date, we've had hundreds of films that have been created. It's been countless success stories of people making great films, funny, interesting, unique, following the genre each year. And we've been so honored that this year and last year, all of the finalists of the Easterseals Disability Film Challenge have been invited to be a part of all the great stuff that's happening at the Portland Film Festival. So I'm honored. I'm excited for this panel.
Cool. Thanks so much. MaLo, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. So my name is MaLo, or Marie-Laure in French. I am French, but I've lived a while in the USA, in New York and in Portland. And I'm in the competition this year in the Keeping Portland Weird short block with an experimental film called This Little Light of Mine, which is trying to answer the question of how does it feel to have a seizure as a photosensitive epileptic. So that is what I am. But I've also wanted to work in film ever since I'm a kid, and I've studied acting, I've studied editing, and I actually studied, I did start a professional career in film distribution and film production in New York. I've worked for places like Zeitgeist Films, IFC Films, Elephant Eye. I did a lot of work in documentaries as well as in long features, especially trying to bring over foreign acquisitions in the States. And then eventually I returned back to France, where I also started to become a subtitle editor and worked as a teacher on the side as I was trying to produce and finish this film that is right now presented at Portland Film Festival and other festivals around the world. I'm lucky. And I'm trying to work on further works of mine and trying also to eventually find ways to work in the industry. And this discussion has always been around in my mind. I think, Nick, for example, what you have started with the challenge is the disability challenge is very important because it gives access and it starts giving knowledge and proper access to people who don't necessarily have the chance to make it there. And I think it's very important because there are voices that are needed.
I 100% agree. Nick, do you want to kind of talk about how you started and why you started the challenge? So I think that's an important thing to note, especially for our audience.
Sure, sure. So, as I said before, first and foremost, I'm an artist myself. I'm a comedian. I'm an actor. I've been in the entertainment industry almost 20 years. So when I started, I was very lucky in that I was able to do my own work and get some roles early in my career, including on The Sopranos. But I did find myself in a place where I was getting a lot of opportunities based on me being a little person. And although some of those opportunities were great, at times I was like, look, there's a lot more to me than me being 3'10". And so that's part of my life, and it's part of my story and my journey, and things that I can talk about and use via a vehicle as an actor and a comedian. But that's only part of it. So I was like, look, if I want to be the gangster or the romantic lead or kind of play the kind of roles that I wanted to do, I realized I was going to have to produce them and create them myself. So that has always been my model of produce as much as I can myself. Sometimes helping out other people, working behind the camera, working as a producer. My specialty is kind of putting people together and sort of being a cheerleader, or being like, come on, I'll help you if you help me. But that has been something that I have found successful for me in terms of getting people to commit to a very short period of time, and not over asking, not saying, hey, I want you to help me for a year, but one day, or can you help me this weekend? So that was really, I when I looked around 9 years ago, for those of you that don't know, people with disabilities are the largest minority population in the country and really the world. Roughly 1 in 4 Americans has a disability, according to a study that was done by the CDC. Yet we're in less than 3% of film and TV shows. So, 9 years ago, I kind of wanted to take action, and that's why I created the challenge. And honestly, I had no idea it would become what it is, or how many people would take part in it, or all the success stories that have been a part of it, or that I'd get a chance to work with amazing festivals, including Portland Film Festival, and talented people, including you, Carl, and getting to meet awesome, cool people, including you, MaLo. Je m'appelle Nikolai, too. I know how to say my name is Nick in French.
Yeah, Nicolas, enchanté.
Well, and that, Nick, you talking about sort of bringing people together. I mean, obviously that's how you and I met, was because you started this challenge, and I found it on Film Freeway, like one Wednesday night, and decided something I really felt like I needed to do. And something that's really been incredible about that particular experience has been the community that's come out of it. I mean, it's really been a community of amazing artists and people who I collaborate with frequently, even outside of the Disability Film Challenge. So that's really, it's been a really impactful thing for me personally. And I think, here talking about disability representation, and also how we bring that into our filmmaking, I think is really, really important. MaLo, I wanna ask you in terms of, your film that you have here, if you can talk a little bit about that, and why you made that film, and what it's about.
So I made that film. I decided to make that film 18 years ago when I was a teenager. So I was at the time I was busy with theater. My brother, who is 4 years older than me, was himself studying camera a lot. I was doing photography, and more I wanted to find a way to speak about it. To speak about epilepsy, because just like Nick said, we are underrated when it comes to representation, or we're typecast. So like epilepsy is also always freaky, it's always the horror show, or it's Ian Curtis committing suicide. It's just depressing. And I wanted to find a way to talk about it, but I also as a cinephile, I wanted to find something that would be of a cinematic experience. And as I started to discover experimental cinema, and experimental genre, not only it struck me that it was the best way to talk about it, because it's just so experimental cinema is very sensational. It can be very boring, but it can be also very sensational. And it does a lot of play with films, with the actual chemistry of film. And I needed to find a way to express, the burning or the overlaying of thoughts or sensations or things that I go through. And even if it's actually quite impossible to actually say how it feels like just because I become unconscious, I still wanted to find a way to portray it. So this is why I used Super 8. This is why I used specifically this genre before moving into fiction, because I was focused on the experiment itself. And just like Nick said as well, it became obvious to me after having seizures, after being an actor in a theater production, that I was going to have to limit myself and learn about production and learn about filmmaking itself, because I was going to have to produce my own material. So I wasn't really clever. It's really hard to find producing for experimental cinema, so I just went solo on this. But I mean, it's good because I also learned, things to do and not to do. It took a while because money is not necessarily easy, because I don't drive and I wanted specific shots in the deserts. But also time can be an advantage, it gave me time to really think about it, to really mature my editing, and to be able to have found footage such as like vintage ophthalmic slides that I incorporated in that. So this is pretty much why I wanted to do it and why I hanged on to it for a while. I didn't know if I was going to finish it because it was hard to face at some point. But I did, and I'm really glad I have. And that's the wonderful thing when you stick to projects, no matter how long they take, is that, they can be very welcoming things. Again, putting people together, making things happen. You start with this little seed, and then it becomes this immense bush. Just like with the challenge, ideas, they blossom, and if they're good, people come to you. And if they answer an audience that still hasn't found its feature, then it'll come. That's the one thing I learned with distribution, is to also trust the instinct and trust the audience. It comes.
And I think that seed and bush metaphor kind of can be applied to representation. And, I'll talk specifically about disability representation in film and television, because we're planting seeds, right? It's in terms of making our own content. And while I myself am a disability advocate, and I am not myself disabled, I have people in my family that are, and I now have a number of close friends that do. And the other thing to remember, especially when it comes to disability, is people can join that community at any point, right? So I think the more that we can represent disabilities in every way, on screen or even behind the camera, where Nick, you talked about the representation in front of the camera. Representation behind the camera is way less, right? But MaLo, you're making your own stuff and you're shooting your own stuff, and you got to figure out a way to do that, with epilepsy. And I think that goes to any time you create something with people. Nick, it looks like you wanna chime in.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in. When you talk about this is a community anyone can join, I like to say that this is a club that is it's inclusive. Anyone can join us at any time. You could end up with a sticker. I like to say, you may get better parking at any time. No, but it's in many senses, I feel the disability community, I consider it like a family. People that take part in the film challenge, we're working together all year. We're going to events. I'm seeing the success that comes out of people, and in many times it's the community is really what's driving the film challenge. And I think disability representation beyond the film challenge, it's not just people without disabilities and studio executives and producers and directors that are driving this movement. I think in many senses it's us as people with disabilities and and activists and advocates like you, Carl, that say, ah, you know what, we got to do something else. That's a funny idea, or this is interesting, and now let's use this cool thing that we have here, because in many senses it's like a superpower. You know, I can talk from a point of view as being a little person and being stuck in an elevator, and you know, other people can't do that kind of joke or tell that story. That's something only I can. So that brings something unique, and something that the industry is starting to kind of wake up to, that these are stories that haven't been told and haven't been told authentically. You know, before, you know, we get back to kind of your next question, Carl, you know, if you want to talk about that, you sort of mentioned about behind the camera, all these roles, you know, in your job, you work, you know, within the studio system and hiring people, you know, and so you have kind of a bunch of different areas that I think you can talk about this. And then specifically as you know, as a filmmaker and somebody who's taken part in the film challenge and honestly won quite a few years, we got a ringer in terms of multiple nominations and wins over here. Can you talk about, you know, one, I think, you know, further explain your film, and, you know, the person that was nominated for best editor happened to have a disability. So do you see other opportunities, you know, for people behind the camera, and can you talk about your film in the process of collaborating with people in front of and behind?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think when I started making films for the film challenge, I didn't realize how bad the representation was behind the camera until I think I started talking to you. And then I was like, oh, wait, what are we doing here? We also have to make sure that we're remembering to do it behind the camera as well. That representation is important. So the film that we have at Portland this year, it's called Archaic, Intergalactic, Extraterrestrials. It's a mockumentary. It was a mockumentary competition, so everybody had to make a mockumentary. But it's about ancient aliens, a mockumentary of ancient aliens. It's on a History Channel. So it's this ridiculous comedic send up of aliens, and you have to see it. I mean, it's not the most easy thing to describe, but it's a ridiculous comedy that, here's the thing, does not in any way address disability. And yet 71% of our cast and crew is disabled. And so all of our on-screen talent have disabilities. We have three wheelchair users, and someone who's blind. Lachi's blind. And then behind the camera, Matthew Placentia, who's nominated for Best Editing, is a wheelchair user and only is able to use one of his hands. And then we have our composer, Izzy, who's also blind. And so, you know, working with talented professionals who also have a disability, for me, it was just a matter of figuring out how to do it and how to accommodate them with the process that we needed to do. So with Izzy, for example, because he's blind and couldn't cut to picture, you know, write music to picture, and literally the entire thing is wall-to-wall music behind it if you go and watch it. We had to write a time-coded list. He and I had a discussion beforehand. He and Matthew had a discussion beforehand, and we all figured out, okay, if we wrote a time-coded list that referenced what happened in that time code, it's essentially doing audio description, which often happens after the fact, just beforehand, in order to help our composer. And he was then able to write his music cues. And he's such a talented composer, and I really love his music. We just wanted to figure out a way that we could actually work together. So I think when it comes to anybody, I mean, it doesn't have to be somebody with a disability necessarily, but you're working with anybody, especially in the film and television mediums where it's very collaborative. You're constantly having those kinds of conversations. And something I can reference is, and I think I mentioned this on our call, we had a pre-call yesterday, the three of us, that I just made a 48-hour film project over the weekend, which is another film challenge. And we were working with a deaf actor. And in the writing process, our writer had never written for a deaf actor before. And I said, oh, you know, she signs, she uses ASL. And he said, well, how do you write for somebody, you know, in ASL? I'm like, you just write the character. You don't have to address the disability. Again, it has no bearing on the story that we told this past weekend either. Like, disability doesn't have to be your story. So, you know, that's something I kind of want to talk about too, because it doesn't have to be about disability. Like, I cast two men who happen to be wheelchair users in a cafe scene, one's a barista and one's a customer, and they're just having a conversation, right? And it's like, that's just life, right? It's not like, hey, what are you doing in a wheelchair? Oh, yeah, I had an accident. Oh, I was born. Like, it's just that's not real life, right? That's not really what happens. So I think when it comes to representation, it's good to note you don't have to make it about the disability. You're not casting a disability. You're casting a person who has a disability, but it doesn't have to be part of your storyline. So I think it's really important to note that. I think when we're talking about like creating this kind of content, like we all have been, the first step is making it, right? I mean, we've all done it. We've all made this stuff. I'd like to talk about also being on set, right? The accessibility of being on set as well. Nick, can you maybe talk a little bit about what your experience has been in the industry and you know, accessibility? Because I can say, like, I can walk onto a film set and I can see how inaccessible they are. So it's not even like they're welcoming, right? It's like needing to figure out that piece is really important.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. When we're talking about accessibility, here's one thing to really note, especially for all you filmmakers listening and other industry professionals, maybe studio executives. The vast majority of accommodations actually don't cost any money. All it takes is just a little extra planning. There's the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is by law, you have to have a certain set of accessibility standards. And that makes it so that a wheelchair user can, use an accessible bathroom, that there's ramps, there's, ways to enter. So, you have a law right there, which makes it somewhat easy that your place you're shooting at shouldn't be in a inaccessible location. Now, mind you, there are things that happen. Hey, we need to climb this hill. There's times where you're on, standing for a very long period of time. So for myself as a little person, I can't stand for a limitless amount of time. So, for me, that's pretty easy. I could just sit on an Apple box or a small chair. So these are things that are not major costs. And many times it's the assistant director, it's the producer, it's my agent. Sometimes it's me talking to the production and saying, hey, these are things that I could use. It's hard for me to walk half a mile to and from set. Is it possible for me to change closer to set? Is there a location? Is there a van? I need a stool to get in and out of the van. I need certain things. And when you are being inclusive and bringing in people with disabilities, and when I say people with disabilities, that is a very wide net because, you're talking about hundreds of different kinds of disabilities, both physical and, visible like mine, and somebody who's in a wheelchair, or somebody has cerebral palsy or Down syndrome. But then again, there's, countless invisible disabilities. So, like MaLo, and so I think it's a combination of being open and not letting a stigma get in the way, because a lot of times, producers or people that are working behind the camera, even productions, they just get too nervous or uncomfortable to ask. And hey, what can we do to further accommodate? And I think when you have that discussion and you're having it before you get on the set, that the vast majority of time you're going to see that it's much easier than it is for you to get catering and finding a table for catering and making your times before you get into meal penalty or all these other things that end up adding to be more logistics and more money, frankly. So it's not really an excuse that I hear from people. Oh, we can't do it, or a lot of times it shouldn't be an excuse. It should be something that goes into that pre-planning process.
100%. And something I've had this conversation with other people, like Tamara Mina, who's a wheelchair user and has had to go onto a set where she couldn't get into the makeup trailer, right? And then they had to like move everything out of the makeup trailer, and then she was out in the cold and getting this done. And it's like it's not equitable, right? It's like it needs to be equitable. Then those accommodations shouldn't be that difficult to do, especially when in our business, right? It's like if you have a grip department and they're building a ramp for the camera and the dolly to go on, can't they do that for people, right? So it's like getting people to think a little bit differently about what those accommodations could be with the stuff you have at hand, especially because we create everything in this business, right? It's like if you're a narrative filmmaker and you have an art department, like everything's being created, right? So it's like, again, it's part of that beginning process.
And I'd also like to add on to, and then, oh, sorry, MaLo, I don't know if real quick, I'll just say something and then I'd like to turn it over to you to hear it, but you have to think about this. But, you know, throughout the last year, if you think about it, the entire world changed how we do everything. You know, for hundreds of years, we've all had to drive into work and sit next to each other and park and drive. And we've learned how much can be done remotely and how there's a different way to get everything done. So, you know, I think
like this panel, we're all in different places.
Exactly. So that same philosophy and spirit, you know, seems to be something that can be transformed for making film sets more accessible and making it so if you have a disability and it's you had different limitations, that those limitations aren't really limitations. You're just doing things in a different way, which has always been the way I've done it. But for other disabilities, and you know, this is opening it up for the industry to be more inclusive.
Yeah, MaLo, I'd like to kind of hear from your experience, because you said when you were an actor, you had to limit yourself and then start doing your own thing, right? But
Yeah.
can maybe talk a little bit about that and anything else that you wanted to say about what we were talking about.
Well, yeah. So because photosensitive epilepsy means that, you know, light is a trigger, and especially either excessive light, just like you have on a set, most don't realize it unless they've been on a set or they know about it. So there's a huge amount of light, you know, on an actor, everywhere, all over the place, also for special effects. And it's the same with stage. And so, you know, eventually I have to wear sunglasses, which is fine if I'm backstage, you know, if I'm stage manager, if I'm going to be assistant producer, you know, like it's going to be fine, or script, whatever, I can have this. But an actor's eyes is like, it's essential. So you can't, unless, you know, on part of the role, it's really hard to do that. So, and also what happened is I would have seizures, which not only I become a liability, but I hurt myself. And it's like, you know, there's only so much I can push. Which is unfortunate because I really love acting. I mean, you know, it's a calling. There's a thing inside. There are voices in my head. There's like imagination. There's a lot of things that, you know, I really wanted to go out there. So, but it was okay because I'm passionate about the whole industry itself. So I was like, okay, maybe I can find other things to do. And eventually, what became complicated for me, because, you know, it's an invisible disability, so people are not expecting things, and they're like, oh, it's a different kind of feel to it. But eventually there's still this door closing movement that happens, or this, oh, let me think about it. And light, and it's also hours, you know, those very, very long hours on the set, those very tiring film sets, and the industry expects to squeeze you out of that, to really, you know, take it all out on you, because it's for the job, because it's for the art, because it's for this, and you have to do it, because otherwise, you know, it won't happen. And so as I went into production, this is what I was targeting. I was like, okay, how can, let me look at it, and may it be in festivals, organization, may it be in film production, you know, let's look at the numbers. And at first it's just like, it's all in my head. I'm following the orders. I'm following what there is to be done. But the more we look into it, the more we go back to what you were saying, which is it's about accommodation, and it's a difference of logistics. It doesn't involve more money. And in independent filmmaking, we are used to, you know, okay, let's find the cheapest, greatest solution that we can go for. So eventually you work out those systems of being creative with ways of producing, ways of, getting good things. So that minimalism with lenses over shots sometimes will help you. You don't have to go extravaganza, but you can still make it look good. And it's the same thing with makeup and hair. You can have somewhat of a place where it's accessible, where you can have it. It's not. I think people cringe because they're not used to it, or because they think it's going to be expensive, or they think it's going to be a hassle, because this is how production works. Is like, oh, I don't want it to be a hassle. I have got so much money invested in it. It has to work. It has to, we can't have it fail. There's this pressure of we can't have it fail. And the thing is that people need to know is that people with disabilities, whichever it is, they're used to working twice as much. They're used to be expected to be at their best, and they will provide their best. And this is from my experience. I've had a lot of encouragements. I've had people that I'm still in touch with, that I worked with, 15 years ago. My first internship, after a month, they were like, we'll give you a green card. Well, it didn't happen because 2008 financial crash. But, there's this thing of like, we will provide our best and you will get really good stuff. Just give us a hand. The moment you give us the hand, you'll know you can count on us. And that's what I want to say to most of the professionals out there. And a lot of them do know it, but I think, there's this thing of like, if you just make it happen, work out the logistics, make sure you ask the person what they need, not step on eggshells, and just be open to it. There's a lot of things that can happen. And that also this unique vision that each people have become, money shots, becomes that punchline. It becomes that rhythm in editing. It becomes this special. It brings so much. And we see it all the time. The more they go into it, the more we see it.
I agree 100%. Something you're talking about, which I think is really important to reiterate, is if you're the assistant director, or you're the producer, or you're the coordinator, and you're sending out emails about parking, you're sending out that call sheet, you're sending out a welcome email to your cast and crew, you could be in that position. And this may be something that you want to talk about, similar to what you would have to do in terms of a safety meeting before. And you can, let that be known. Hey, now is a good time for us to, talk about what kind of accommodations our team may need. And, some of those accommodations, again, they're going to help make everything run smoother. And there should be an openness and a willingness, because when you're on a film or you're on a TV show, you're almost joining a family. You guys all need to work together. You need to get your production done. You need to get it done in time. And, there's going to be things that come up, and things are not going to go perfect, and things are not going to go the way you designed it. And that's not just disability. That's film and entertainment. You're going to have to do a lot of different things.
That's the nature of it.
So the more you can be open about those things, and destigmatize those issues, then the better it's going to be with your production. And I think one last thing I'd like to say about that too is, in terms of MaLo saying people with disabilities work twice as hard. I think sometimes that is true. And I think, I always say that, as a little person, I was born an entrepreneur, because I have to figure out how I'm going to wash my hands. And so sometimes I'm in a bathroom walking in, and I'm turning over a trash can, and I'm standing on that, and I know how to figure out how to do that in real time. Now, that's a benefit to any production, to any company, because I'm going to be doing those on-set problem solving and figuring out what I need. And whether it's me doing it myself or bringing somebody else in, I guarantee you, even without disabilities, your film and your TV show is going to have more and more of those, problems, issues come up. And it's not just disability, it's going to be about the amount of time, or you lose your location, or the sun changes, or it starts to rain. So you're going to need to think about how are you going to be able to change and adapt, and how can you efficiently have everybody on your team kind of work together to help you do that. And that's independent filmmaking 101, and it doesn't change even if you're doing a major TV show or movie. You just have more money when you get to that stage, but there's still those same issues and problems that come up, and they're still looking for people to help solve those problems.
Well, and something I want to talk about to that too is accessibility to talent that I didn't know existed before I became a disability advocate, and found an entire group of people who had been completely ignored, essentially, right? We're talking like 3% of the population, 3% of the roles on film and TV are given people, at least show a disability. And out of that 3%, 95% of those roles are played by able-bodied actors. So where's the representation, right? So when I found this incredibly talented group of people, both in front of and behind the camera, I think, again, to both of your points, like, yes, we're working harder for sure, but also bringing that different perspective. And MaLo, I think you really talked about that too, like bringing that different perspective really enhances your project. At least it has on the ones that I've worked on. And now I consistently work with a lot of the same people, right? And the disability doesn't matter when it comes to the storylines. It doesn't matter when it comes to utilizing somebody, and their skill set. You just figure out a way to make it work. Sorry, MaLo, it looked like you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I when you said that, it doesn't have to be about the disability, or it sometimes, like, I needed to make it about this, but a lot of people have asked me, what's next? And it's true that I want to move away from it. Like, I've been enclosed in it by force, but at first that was that was not what I wanted to do. And actually, being able to work on a lot of different things, it doesn't have to be about this. It doesn't have, and I think that's the problem. That's a typical casting, issue that has to do with a lot of things. May it be, a person who looks from that type of ethnicity, this person who looks like she's from the South, and so she's gonna play like this kind of character for the rest of her life. It's the issue with typecasting, which is so sad, because an actor is supposed to be a palette of a lot of different things. And you'd be surprised, but again, the audience really likes it when it changes around. I think that trying to enclose the audience into, oh, they like this, so we're going to keep going with this, or enclose an actor into, I think Leonardo DiCaprio talked about this after Titanic. He was like, holy, what am I going to happen to me? I'm always going to be, the teenage lover boy. And he wanted to change. And he was really happy when he started working with Scorsese, because he got into a whole different kind of acting, which he really wanted to have access to. And so it's, that discussion goes for any kind of actor, but yeah, with disability, it doesn't have to be about it. I'm good with lights because I got my little, I'm photosensitive, so any kind of change of light, I see it. So that's why I'm really good with a script. That's why I'm really good with editing, because I see those things. With my photography, low lights, so you don't have to you don't need all those lights. You can find ways tricks to work around it. So it's there are a lot of things. It's an idea of opening up and letting people in and teaching the craft as well. I think with distribution, there's this thing of like, you need to know what people are attracted to. You need to know how distributors work to know what are the ingredients you need to keep. This is how I became really interested in lenses. I was like, oh, okay, that's what I need. I need good lenses, and I need to make it look good, because I've been in acquisitions. So I know what people are like, they don't even look, they don't go through it. They're just like, yeah. So there's an element of aesthetic that is very important. And I think, you know, the more you do workshops with people, you can teach them very easy craft to be like, stick to that. And if you stick to that, you can go very far with very little, and, you know, talk about a lot of things. That's also the things, knowing the trick, because it's a game. Like, if you know, it's chess. If you know the other opponent's move, then you can really go for, as a little pawn, you become queen. So, you know.
It's interesting. I wanted to piggyback a little bit on what you were saying, because technology, right? When we talk about technology, and now sort of HD cameras and 8K and all these cameras that you now are like a black magic can be shot with a candle, right? And has enough lumens that you can actually do it, that you don't need the super bright lights anymore. And something that I do as a filmmaker, and oftentimes as part of the film challenges, like the Disability Film Challenge, where they give you a genre, they give you a theme, and they give you a prop that have to be included, and that you write to those things, right? You have 5 days to do it. You have to write, shoot, edit, do everything in that 5-day period, but you write to what you have. Like, ultimately, if you are the creator and you know, well, I can't be around big lights, you're not going to create that. That's not going to be the thing that you make. That may be a different artist's thing. Let them take the bright light thing. You will do a lower light thing if that's what you want to do, or ways to simulate things in a way that don't, because, you know, we work in a business of imagination, right? We're always kind of creating something that isn't necessarily real per se, or, you know, even if it's like fake blood. I was working with fake blood over the weekend, and you know, I mean, it was fun. I had like fake blood dripping on me, you know, over the weekend. But it's imagination, right? It's like you're kind of coming up with it, and you can figure out what you can work with in order to make it palatable for you personally, especially when you are an artist. But MaLo, you brought up a good point in terms of distribution. And I know we're looking at maybe 15 minutes left here, but accessibility of content, right? So it's like, we've talked a little bit about the pre-production and putting people, you know, representation-wise in it, what sets are like, and I know we've kind of touched on these things, but accessibility of content, I think, is really important, because, you know, I went to a movie theater. We were part of the 48-hour film project 2 years ago, where we won Best of Los Angeles. And the way that theater was set up, even though in advance I reached out and I said, is it wheelchair accessible? Because I have a number of people who are wheelchair users that need access to the theater. And I was assured it was wheelchair accessible. So it became abundantly clear very quickly that it was only wheelchair accessible to a certain level, because when we won, 3 of my actors could not come down to the awards area because that part wasn't accessible, but only the back was. And Nick, you've experienced that too, which is why you hold your stuff at the middle, that middle area, right, of movie theaters.
Yeah, I will chime in with that. I think, you know, something that's interesting is almost any time I do a live event, I'm pre-thinking about where would we put an ASL interpreter if we get the accommodations request of somebody who's deaf of hard of hearing. You know, is this wheelchair accessible? And if it is, where would we do our presentation? And, you know, the one thing I have found in most movie theaters around the country is the middle is wheelchair accessible, and to get seating is wheelchair accessible. But if you want to give an awards presentation or speech, many times, you know, those are done at the very bottom below the, you know, screen. And many times there are 2 steps there. And so people are like, well, it's mostly, and you're like, well, mostly doesn't count if you're in a wheelchair that's, you know, it's a manual, you know, it's a power chair that could weigh hundreds of pounds. So you got, you know, 2 little people trying to lift 400-pound wheelchair. That's not going to work. So what we've kind of found is we'll unify and kind of do that Q&A in the middle. And many times it works just as good, and sometimes better, you know. So these are real-time accommodations that I'll do, and that's just because, look, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for a long time. I've you know had hundreds and hundreds of events that I've been a part of. So I'm not going to cancel anything and say we're not going to do anything. We're going to find a way to get it done. Now, in a perfect world, is there access to the bottom of the theater? Yeah, but these are things that hopefully are getting worked out by movie theaters. And believe me, there's been certain places where they have literally, gone right into a staff meeting after about figuring out ways that they can change or what alternatives they have. But in terms of doing Q&As in the middle, I will say that sometimes it's actually, you're right there. So as a comedian, I'm able to kind of do real-time crowd work on both sides, and I'm able to kind of work the room. So there's always a will to
targeted
get,
me a few times when I've been in the front.
Yeah.
You've targeted me. Yeah, I realized that. But no, you're always really good about that. And I've learned a lot from you, Nick. And something I just want to bring back to the production aspect, and something that making that film that, again, the stage wasn't 100% accessible that time. I had to find a sound stage in Los Angeles that was accessible, because again, a number of my talent had a disability. And when I went to the soundstage where we ended up shooting, the bathroom door was not wide enough for a standard wheelchair. And I said, you guys claim that you're ADA compliant, you're ADA, you're accessible. This is not. I cannot shoot here unless you do something about this. And so they measured it, they cut a bigger door, they swapped the door to the makeup room with that door because it was wide enough so people could get into the restroom, but then they couldn't get into the makeup room. And I said, at least if there's a place to use the restroom, we will figure out the makeup, because makeup is movable. And so we just moved everything out and everybody had their makeup out in this other area. So real-time accommodations, right? It's like figuring those things out and how to do it. But also, I think in the content itself, something that I've come to realize is audio description, for example, right? For limited sight people or blind people is hugely important. And I learned that when IO, which was a Disability Film Challenge film, had been put into an audio description. And for me as an artist, I listened to it and it wasn't super exciting to hear it, right? I was just like, I don't want my film experience this way, and started really getting me to think about how to make accessible content, even from the very beginning. Like I was saying, with working with our composer, having to come up with maybe what that audio description is earlier on in the process, or even in the writing process. Because MaLo, you're talking about looking at that end product, right? You're like, what the audience is going to want and why you are getting into lenses, because you know what you need it to look like. That can go towards every part of this process. So, I mean, you work a lot with film, but I mean, have you experienced anything else in terms of like accessibility to the content itself, or things that you have done to make your content more accessible sort of on the back end?
So my content as of now is very limited to what I've just presented here, like This Little Light of Mine, this is it. But as a subtitle editor, yes, I've thought, for example, about, because I do have dyslexia. It's very, very mild, but I have it. So for example, subtitles need to be readable. It used to be a time where subtitles were in yellow, which actually is a better color than white. Now most of it is white, and it's not that easy to read. And for people with dyslexia, also sometimes they're a little too fast. And it may sound weird, but when you're doing subtitles, there's this rule, and it's mostly applied in documentaries because people talk more, but you reduce it just a little bit. There are words that you can cut or you can change it so that it's easier to read. I think sometimes you can do this. My vision is also, you always, when you're doing this, you need to be able to talk with the director and the producer just to make sure that, everyone's on board with this. I laughed when you talked about auto description, because there's that in the French public system. There's this on TV. I remember in the States, I was really, one thing that taught me English was closed caption, which is something I discovered because that it didn't exist in France. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. But so I was able to listen and read at the same time, which helped me a lot. It happened a little later in France, but we do have audio description, and audio description is boring. It's quite boring. And I think, you know, why not have actors act it out a little bit more? Or, you know, there can be ways to do it better. Or the same thing with things for people who are deaf, subtitles for people who cannot hear. Again, there can be ways to arrange it. I think the best way to work it is, again, you need to, if I were to think about this in a distribution, because I'm not deaf, I would want to work with a consultant who is. And this is also something that distribution can think about. And I was lucky to enter distribution in early 2000s or mid 2000 when it was still huge. You know, it did go through some sort of crisis. And I think a lot of, I think it's very important to keep the diversity in distribution, in distributors themselves, because, you know, those ideas, they come in this way as well. And you have people who can be concerned. And so I think DVDs had a value as well. You know, those objects had a value because you could include more things into it than things that you have on platforms. I'm not sure that platforms nowadays have the same range of, you know, things you could put in a DVD set. And I'm not saying it's a fact, you know, and they should think about it. We had attained a certain level of things that could have started a process. And in terms of what is available now, there are more subtitles. Yes, we have it, you know, in Spanish and Russian and in French, whatever. This is great to learn, you know, if you want to learn languages. But accessibility is not necessarily thought of always. And I think consultants, and this is how they can come in, you know, is as consultant. And and that's the way I worked also with distribution. Earlier on, Nick said, you know, he's like gluten. He puts people together and he likes to do this. This is something that I'm a little bit the same. And a lot of the time, you know, it's like those solution solving things is also collaboration. The more you collaborate, then you have two brains, you know, thinking. And you cannot put yourself in a disabled, like, there's only so much people with disabilities, any kind of disabilities, will talk about. And you cannot put yourself in their shoes. So whenever you're trying to find solutions for them, the best thing is just to ask and to see if it works. And I was listening to you guys talk about a ramp. I mean, for anyone who's worked in a theater, in festivals, whatever, you call it carpenter, you build something like in a couple hours, it's done. So, you know, it's just, again, ask, collaborate, make it happen.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And, you know, I think something else that's really unique is you really have 2 point of views, MaLo. One is an artist with a disability, but also somebody that works, you know, on the other side, which is distribution. Have you seen any differences? And, you know, what is your feeling on content, you know, being distributed? You know, were you seeing films that were, you know, disability centric in the inclusive of people with disabilities when you're on that side? You know, do you feel like it's changing?
Right, activate that. So it's okay. I think that it's changing to the better. You know, like Breaking Bad, the actor who plays the son did have cerebral palsy. Nonetheless, I think that Dustin Hoffman did a great job when he played Rain Man. That's my vision of things. I think now what I've learned with distribution and the way what distributors look at is they're very keen on aesthetic. And this is what I found the most. You can have a great story with a lot of good elements. If the aesthetics are a bit off, they will tend to put it to the side. And that is crushing. And this is what I wanted to give, the biggest thing that I've learned for myself. I was like, and when I was doing Super 8, that's also, I was like, okay, Super 8, everybody loves it. We love to put it in movies. It's memories. Everybody's got a feel to it. So Super 8, people are good. And it talks to experimental cinema. So like there was going to be something to it. Even if, I got obsessed in the end to be able to have a computer strong enough to deliver 4K. Because I was like, it's got to look good and big. And then I wanted to get a digital camera. I'm not rich, so I can't get a big one. I'm not a DP, so I can't get something. But I wanted to get something nice. So I got a Canon 5D Mark IV. And a Canon 5D Mark IV is a camera on which you can put vintage lenses. And vintage lenses have a certain quality, a certain coating that makes it pop. And I think that distributors, no matter the age, no matter what time, no matter what it is that they're looking at, they're thinking, are we going to have the domino effect of people talking to each other and be like, oh, you got to go see this, you got to go see that, are we going to have that ripple effect? Is it going to pop? Is the trailer going to attract people? And so I was like, I got to have this camera. And I learned also that the more you do crazy shots, the more you need technical aspects, or you need training to know how to do this. The more you go like, Igmar Bergman, and you do just minimalist, and you do very slow movements. If you have great story, if you have great acting, good editing, people will dive into it. So distributors, and I learned it in Paris, Netherlands, New York, Portland. It's the DP is so important. I find it to be the most important element in your crew is your DP, because he's going to make it look good. And that is what distributors look at. That's what Amazon, Netflix, whatever, independent distributors, really good ones. That's what they look at. And I think that's usually the content that gets set aside is based on aesthetic. If it looks good, you can put whatever you want in it.
Well, and so that's because Squid Game right now is like the #1 show in the world on Netflix. And it's a Korean show, which typically would not perform well in the United States because foreign content doesn't always perform well. And yet it's the #1 show, right? So I think the rules kind of go out the window when something's good. And that's something that's really, I think, important to note. And MaLo, you touched on something too a little bit earlier about saying like having a consultant, having people with disabilities in distribution, right? I think that can be said across the board. Obviously, I was talking about for on set, in front of camera, behind the camera, but think about how many jobs in the entertainment industry are part of this business, right? It's like casting directors, right? Producers themselves, executives, marketing people, publicists, like it runs the gamut. And when you think about how many jobs are essentially created from a Marvel movie, for example, right? You get like 1,000 jobs from essentially 200 pieces of paper, because that's how long those scripts are, right? As creators, as filmmakers, as artists, as people who make things, like we're in a business where we can literally create 1,000 jobs from 200 blank pieces of paper. And think about the power in that, right? You can raise economies that way. You can give people opportunities that they wouldn't have had. You can create training programs. Like, imagine if you have mentorships along the way, because the other piece of this is, how do you train people up, right? And make them better. That's what I love about the film challenges. I call it going to the filmmaker gym, right? It's like sort of getting your reps in order to make things, and getting people to be like, oh, I can direct, or oh, I can act, or I can edit, or all these things. And it's like, it's a very sort of low barrier of entry with very high reward, because look, we're at the Portland Film Festival, right? And it's like, how amazing is it to be among all these really incredibly talented artists, you know, from around the globe. You know, MaLo, you're in France, right? I mean, it's like we get a chance to kind of collaborate and communicate, and again, that sense of community that comes from doing this, I think, is really important to note.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important that you say that. And just to give a shameless plug, we'll probably be opening up, and when I say probably, be on the lookout. If you go to disabilityfilmchallenge.com, January 2022, we'll be announcing our dates of the 2022 Easterseals Disability Film Challenge. We had films from all over the world this year. You can participate from anywhere. And it is about having somebody with a disability in front of or behind the camera. I won't tell you the genre yet. I won't tell you any other details. You're going to have to follow us online. Make sure to follow us on our social handles as we give announcements. But I'd like to bring up something else that you talked about. When talking about distribution, I mean, you talk about a training ground. Something else that was very important for me when I decided to come up with this, with the film challenge, was not just to have the films made and have them be private and only displayed if you win or for a shortened period of time. Every one of these films are up on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, and our Instagram channel. So if you go to our YouTube page, you can literally watch hundreds of films. This year we had 94 films from all over the world, which together, some of these can be it's 3 to 5 minute films with an extra minute, which includes credits. So combined, we have more content than the Tiger King, which is a very popular Netflix series. So this is something that what I've always felt that is important is not just to make the films, not just to work as an actor and start to work in front of and behind the camera, but also to share your work with the world. And we are in a time when we're not reliant on those barriers of distribution that we once had. Now we have people that are successful comedians that have, TV deals that choose YouTube as a distribution platform because they're able to monetize it there and it's able to help market them and get those other opportunities. So if you're an artist with a disability, don't feel like, hey, I can't do it if it's not going to be on the big screen, because you now have the ability to make anything the big screen. And, the more you put yourself out there, the more you're opening yourself up to other jobs, to people in France. MaLo may see it and be like, I gotta, write, this person into something. And it's about building your network. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. And, if you enter the film challenge, that's part of it. So this is not an inward thing. This is forward facing. It's about pride in your disability. It's about pride in your work. And, I know I feel quite a bit of pride being here, talking about the film challenge, talking about all the finalists, which I hope you get a chance to see the finalists of this year's 2021 Easterseals Disability Film Challenge within the Portland Film Festival, and to watch all these amazing films, including MaLo's film, Carl's film, which is in that block, and his film screened last year. So I can't thank, the Portland Film Festival enough. And all of you guys. And I just wanted to I know we're starting to, dismount a little bit, but I just wanted to kind of, make sure to let people know that are tuning in that, yes, there are abilities for you to have your film, released on, 3,000 theaters, a feature film, like the Titanic, but there's so many different avenues for yourself to distribute yourself and to get yourself out there now. And so I would strongly advise, you know, you're going to hire yourself, your friends are going to hire you, the people that you work with, the people that you come in contact with in the Portland Film Festival, in the breakout rooms, in the community. We are our own agents, managers, you know, sales agents. Even when we do have those, and we're lucky enough to have those, they're only going to take you so far. And your team and who you work with is going to take you that extra step. So make sure to always pay it forward when you have that ability to give somebody a job, when you're able to kind of look through and help people. But again, to do as much as you can. That's been my philosophy in my career. And, you know, and that which the Film Challenge has kind of spawned out of is do as much as you can, put it out there, and don't be afraid of kind of, you know, making noise.
Well, and something else to that point, Nick, about you know, getting the film out there. Something else about the Film Challenge is there's an awareness campaign that's tied to it. So it's specifically to get people to promote their work, to get news stories going, to get people starting a real conversation and keeping that conversation going, just like we're doing here today. MaLo, were there any last words that you wanted to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Nick is totally right. You know, when you're looking at distribution, the biggest change is definitely internet. And now we're able to make our own screens, and people have, you know, big projectors at home. So actually, you don't know, you know, the size of how big it's going to get projected. And, you know, you're making content, first of all, is to share it. You know, you want to share it with the world. So you have YouTube, you have Vimeo, you have all sorts of things. And, you know, again, if it looks good, if you go out there and if you reach out to people, you know, you will be able to make a lot of great encounters. And festival roads, you know, often, you know, directors forget about this. It's like, no, go for it. Because, you know, we got to meet each other here in this festival. You guys, Diane, you made it happen. Even with this current crisis, we still were able to have it online because of internet, and we still are able to see films, to meet, to do workshops, to have panels. And so it's very important. And, you know, you have Film Freeway, you have Short Film Depot, and in the States, you have to pay a fee, but there are a lot of festivals in Europe that are free. You know, most French directors, you know, they discover fees for festivals when they go out to the Americas. But in Europe, it's like $10, $8, $0. So, and you get to meet a lot of good people, and that's how you build a network, you get out there. And I mean, it's not you know, it's not a magic little secret, you know. It's just the more you put yourself out there, the more happens. And if you're talented, and if you know, it gets out there, and you can learn as you go as well. And you know, last week I had this documentary, Anthony Merchak, he did this documentary about the explosion in Beirut. And he self-produced it himself. Everything was done by himself. And he had a lot of emotional, you know, he was getting a bit depressed about it. And I asked him, you know, did you send this to Clermont-Ferrand Film Festival? And he was like, nah, I didn't have French subtitles, so I didn't do it. I was like, dude, do it. You know, if you get accepted, you'll work on it. Just go for it. And he didn't know. And eventually we made it happen because it was like very close to the deadline. And I had been to the festival, so I know some people, so I could say, you know, get it, because it's really interesting. You know, it's inside footage of this explosion. It's very interesting. That's what happens. And I'm not necessarily, you know, but it's how it builds. And internet, you're able to get it out there, leave out the ego, and just go for the craft itself and the art itself. So yeah.
That's why it's called Netflix, not DVD Flix. That's what I heard back when they were naming it. But no, really great points. And truly, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Before we do wrap it up, I just want to know for the audience, how can people find each of you? Nick, like, where can you be found online? How can people follow you?
So you can follow me at Nick Novicki. That's my name with no K, Nick, because I like to be difficult. But it's just NICNOVICKI, and that's on all social platforms. Also, you can follow at Disability Film Challenge to learn about what's happening with the Easterseals Disability Film Challenge, about upcoming workshops, screenings, panels that we do. So we're doing year-round events. It's not just the film challenge weekend, and it's not just the screenings that we do, but we've done quite a few different events throughout the year. And when I say quite a few, a lot. The fact that we were in a virtual world, it opened it up to allow us to do so many different screenings and workshops, and working with our partners, which we are sponsored by studios, networks, and Fortune 500 companies. So there are a lot of prizes too. So make sure to also be on the lookout when we announce next year's film challenge.
Cool. MaLo, what about you? How can people follow you in your work?
So they can find me at MaLo Sutra Fish. There's my name up there. There's a website, malosutrafish.com, where you can see mostly my photo work. On Instagram, also on Facebook. That's pretty much all the social media I use. And also one last thing, remember that most of the filmmakers that we like and we look at were self-taught. We can self-teach things very easily. Resolve, probably Blacklight Resolve, it's the easiest editing thing there is. That's what I use, and I find it the most really efficient. And that's the one last thing I wanted to say, because that's pretty much where I'm coming from with all of the art. Is like most of it was self-taught, and there's a lot of craft to be found out there. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm Carl Hansen. You can find me on Instagram at fhansen1. That's FHANSEN, the number 1, or on Facebook, the Carl Hansen, because regular Carl Hansen was taken by a Danish chairmaker, and that is not me. But you can find me there. And guys, I feel like I could talk for another at least hour plus with you about it. Nick, you and I always talk about it anyway, so it's like an extension.
We do. We talk about this a lot, but before we leave, I do want to make it clear that Carl is a furniture maker. So if he says that he's not that guy, he's lying. So.
Oh, you gave it away. Oh, this lovely chair that I designed for myself. Oh, one thing I do want to mention, and MaLo, this goes to what you were saying, like most people have one of these. You can make your own content now. This shoots 4K. You can make your own content and do it. And I've made stuff, edited stuff, and distributed it on YouTube, from my phone. So please go out and make stuff. Like the world needs your artistry and your craft. And thank you all for joining us today. For Portland Film Festival, Carl Hansen, Nick Novicki, and MaLo Sutrafish. Thank you all very much.
Lovely to have you, to speak with you. Lovely.
Thank you.